This is Scott from KIG. It is January 27th, 2022. We're going to do a couple runoff videos today of this 2012 Thermal Care 20-ton 460 volt chiller that's been in our shop going through a refurbishment and retest process. And this is sold, going to a new home tomorrow out in Colorado. This is our model NQA20, Thermal Care's model. 460 volt 3-phase, dual compressors, 5 horsepower process pump, R410A refrigerant. On the inside of the cabinet, there's a similar label. This chiller we upgraded and converted to the standard, more robust condenser coils, copper tubes with the aluminum fins. What does that mean? That means right around 2012 is when people are coming out and using micro channel coils, which have been improved drastically, but they had some fallbacks, disadvantages, repairability if they developed a leak, which this chiller had when we got it. So we put on two brand new, more robust, conventional coils. Took some work, took some money, but in doing so, they do use more refrigerant, and any chiller HVAC tech will tell you that's normal. So it uses about 45 pounds of R410A, which is in there now, and it's going to ship fully charged. This is the inside of our electrical area. The power actually comes from, it's actually going to be pre-wired in here, essentially, because we're going to ship it with the disconnect, which it came with. It has a couple, has 300 amp fuses in there. So you're going to bring your power, customer's going to bring their power into the top of the disconnect here. The unit does have a phase monitor, which is nice. So right down here, kind of tough to see with the camera. They both look yellow. But if a green light comes on, your phase is good. If it doesn't come on, switch any of the 2 out of the 3 hot legs going into your disconnect. What do we have in the cabinet here? We have contactors for each of the compressors. We have the pump contactor, an overload, resettable. And we have the 2 contactors for the fans, 24 volt DC power supply, a thermostat for the, that thermostat's actually for a heater that goes on the refrigeration receiver. This has a refrigeration receiver, which is kind of a nice high-end option for a flooded condenser. That's more for low ambient conditions, but it certainly is still a nice higher end option to have. It's certainly not going to hurt you if you're going to run this indoors, which the customer probably will. Controller transformer, PLC, disconnect. This little jumper here, we're gonna put a cap on it. That's if you want to use the remote on off. We'll leave one end attached, and we got a note here, use terminal 4 and 24 if you want to turn it on and off remotely. A couple things just on the inside. This thing creates a lot of airflow when we turn it on. But again, you have to have the doors closed for it to operate correctly. In the bottom section here, you have your 5 horsepower pump, the refrigeration receiver I just mentioned about, or talked about, and your 2 scroll compressors. I'll go over the other side here. We repainted some of the doors. We also got some new latches. Here's another view of your compressors. These have heater bands on them, and the heater stays active as long as you have live power coming into the chiller. And it's nice to keep those live power on all the time to keep the refrigerant and the compressors from getting too cold. Here's your reservoir tank. Little sight glass there, temperature probe. That's your braze plate, fluid to refrigerant heat exchanger. That's just a test drain right there. Leave that in the vertical closed position. The chiller has 2-inch NPT connections. This is just our test loop. We have the unit filled up with about 40% glycol right now. If you're going to run the unit at about a 30-degree set point, we want to see you use 35% glycol solution or 40%. I don't like seeing it much less than that. We put on a GPM flow meter. In theory, 20 tons of cooling, you like to see about 2.4 gallons per minute per ton. If you're going to be running colder temperatures, colder meaning below nominal meaning something below 45, 50 average temperature degrees, that 2.4 GPM per ton can be reduced 5, 10, 20%. This is your pump. It's suctioning off the reservoir tank. Then it pumps out to the process. It's going to go out to your process, then come back to the from process fitting here. This chiller already has an internal flow bypass. We're going to ship it at the 50% cracked open number. That ultimately can be adjusted depending on several process parameters. If your process machine has solenoid valves on it that open and close, that's important to have this open, not completely shut, so you have sufficient flow coming back to the chiller at all times. The glycol pump runs all the time. You have our 1TXV thermal expansion valve for a typical operation, typical plant user. You don't really need to worry about that. That's more for an HVAC tech if you ever have a problem down the road. We keep the gauges on during our run process all the time. Obviously we disconnect those when we start running and testing. So I'm going to come back video number 2 in a second and turn it on.